In the farthest reaches of the galaxy, where stars burned like quiet sentinels and silence ruled the void, something impossible happened. Imperial space, the proud domain of the Zorvathian Empire, known for its unbreakable defenses and absolute control, was suddenly disturbed. A single object, enormous and unknown, appeared just beyond the edge of their outermost patrol line. It wasn't detected by sensors. It didn't arrive through a jump gate or wormhole. It was simply there, as if the fabric of space had folded for a second and left behind this colossus. The Imperial outpost sent alerts, confused and fearful. What they saw on their long-range scans didn't make sense. A ship, massive, heavily armed, but clearly not Zorvathian, was moving at a steady pace deeper into their territory. It had no identification code, no flag, no escort. Most alarming of all, it was of human design. For centuries, humans had been dismissed as fractured, noisy beings who talked more than they fought. The last report on them had placed their fleets near their own corner of the galaxy, disorganized and dealing with internal politics. No one, not even the most paranoid strategist, believed humanity could construct something like this. The ship was shaped like a spearhead, black as the void itself, and bristling with weapons no one could identify. Its presence alone caused panic. The defense grid, which had never failed in 300 years, didn't react. No defense turrets activated. No alarm sounded. The ship seemed to exist outside of their systems, as if it was something more than metal, something ancient, something watching. The Zorvathian High Council gathered in emergency session. The Grand Chamber, usually filled with slow debates and proud speeches, now buzzed with unease. Holographic displays showed the ship's progress. It was slow, purposeful, and unstoppable. Fleet Admiral Threx demanded immediate action, suggesting they send their entire home fleet to intercept and destroy it before it reached any inhabited system. But Chancellor Varn, an old and calculating leader, raised a clawed hand to silence the room. "It has not fired a single shot," he said, his voice heavy with uncertainty. "If it wished to attack, we would already be at war." Others weren't so sure. Diplomats tried to contact the humans, hoping to understand if this was some test or mistake. The reply from Earth was immediate and terrifying. "We have not sent any ship. We do not recognize the signature. We advise caution. If it's what we think it is, it's not under our control." The chamber fell into cold silence. Historians were summoned, old Earth records accessed, files decrypted. One name kept repeating: Project Leviathan. A classified initiative from Earth's darkest era, when wars had nearly destroyed them. According to fragments recovered from the past, Project Leviathan was humanity's last attempt to create a guardian ship so powerful it could end any war, anywhere. But the project was believed to have been scrapped, the prototype lost in deep space before it was completed. If this ship was real, if it was that ship, then it was never destroyed. It had been out there, silent, waiting. And now it had returned, not to Earth, but to them. Out in the void, the warship continued its quiet approach. It didn't slow down. It didn't change course. It ignored the fighter squadrons that flew close to observe it. Its hull reflected no light. It left no energy trail. And when one brave Zorvathian pilot tried to scan it with a high-frequency pulse, his ship shut down completely for 10 minutes. The warship did not react. It didn't need to. The pilot, shaken and pale, was pulled from his craft, whispering about something, looking back at me through the ship. As if the warship had eyes, not mechanical ones, but something else entirely. The people across the Empire began to whisper. Was it a ghost ship? A relic from a forgotten war? Or was it something more dangerous, an intelligence that had evolved far beyond human understanding, now returning to see what had become of the galaxy? The council argued again, louder this time, desperate for answers. Some wanted to destroy it, others feared what would happen if they even tried. The scientists could not explain its silence. The engineers could not understand how it moved. The military could not touch it. And all the while, the ship drew closer toward one of their colony worlds, rich in resources and poor in defense. Rumors spread faster than facts. Some claimed the humans had sent it as a message, Others believed it was acting on its own, following an old mission that never ended. A few began to wonder if the ship was here not to conquer, but to judge. What if it had seen something? What if it had chosen this moment for a reason? The council feared the worst, but they had no answers. All they could do was watch, as this mysterious human warship, silent, dark, and unstoppable, entered deeper into their space, with a calmness more terrifying than war itself. And far away, on forgotten Earth, an old satellite flickered to life, whispering ancient words from an abandoned database. Leviathan detected. Status active. Inside the grand chamber of the Zorvathian High Council, everything felt heavier than usual. The air was filled with nervous energy, as if even the walls were listening. Around the enormous circular table sat the most powerful minds of the Empire, military leaders, science ministers, deep space strategists, and ancient advisors whose knowledge came from centuries of war and diplomacy. They were not used to fear. They had ruled the stars with confidence for generations, but now a single ship had entered their territory and nothing made sense anymore. That ship, massive, dark, and silent, was still moving deeper into their space, ignoring every warning, refusing every attempt at contact. It didn't fire, didn't respond, and yet somehow it was more terrifying than an entire enemy fleet. The council couldn't understand why. That was the real danger. They were afraid of something they didn't understand, and that fear was beginning to spread. Chancellor Varn sat at the center, his long fingers tapping slowly on the polished surface of the table. His eyes, usually calm and steady, now flickered with doubt. Around him, the voices of the council rose and fell, some filled with anger, others with panic. Admiral Threx, loud and proud as always, demanded they mobilize the fleet and destroy the unknown ship before it reached the inner colonies. He spoke of honor, strength, and pride, but beneath his strong words, everyone could sense his desperation. Others, like Minister Raloth, advised caution. They argued that attacking something unknown could lead to disaster. "We don't know what it is," he said, "and we don't know what it wants. What if it's more than a ship? What if it's something we were never meant to see?" His words were met with silence, not because the council disagreed, but because deep down, they feared he might be right. To calm the growing fear, they called in the Empire's top scientists and historians. What they revealed made the chamber go completely still. The ship's design matched something from ancient human records, something Earth itself no longer controlled. Project Leviathan. A forgotten human weapon. A myth from another time. A ship built for final wars, with systems beyond normal technology, possibly with an artificial intelligence so advanced it could make decisions like a living being. And the most disturbing part, it had no current command. It wasn't following Earth. It was following its own code. A ship built for war that now wandered the galaxy alone, watching, listening, and maybe judging. That was what created real panic. It wasn't just a ship. It might be something else entirely. Arguments continued for hours. The military feared it was a test before a surprise attack. The scientists warned that provoking it might cause irreversible damage to space-time or awaken old systems they couldn't control. The politicians were trapped in the middle, trying to protect their worlds and keep the Empire from falling into chaos. Some wanted to communicate again, to try peaceful signals or show signs of respect. Others wanted to cut the Empire off from the ship's path, evacuate colonies, and wait in silence. But every suggestion was filled with uncertainty. No one truly knew what would happen next. Every second they delayed, the ship moved closer. And then, the most shocking thing happened. A signal was received. Not from Earth. Not from any known source. But from the ship itself. A short, cold message played on all channels at once. A single sentence, spoken in perfect Zorvathian tongue: "You are not the target." The chamber froze. What did that mean? Was it moving through their space on the way to something else? Was it ignoring them or warning them? The signal repeated once, then stopped. No more messages came. The council sat in silence, the weight of those 5 words pressing down on them. It should have been a relief, but instead it felt like a threat hidden inside calmness. Not the target, but could that change? Chancellor Varn finally stood. His voice was soft, but carried the authority of someone who had seen many wars. He reminded them that fear leads to mistakes. That reacting without understanding was the same as inviting destruction. He ordered that no attack be made unless the ship made the first move. Observation stations were set up along its path. Colonies nearby were quietly moved to emergency mode. The decision was clear. They would not provoke the warship, but they would not ignore it either. They would watch, record, and wait for as long as necessary. But outside the chamber, in the far corners of the Empire, people whispered. In spaceports, in military bases, and even in quiet family homes, the story spread. A human warship had entered their space. Their great empire, the one believed to be unbeatable, was watching it in silence, unable to act. Some called it the beginning of something greater, a new era. Others feared it was a punishment for their pride. But all agreed on one thing: the galaxy had changed. Something had awakened. And no matter what the Council decided, nothing would ever be the same again. Far beyond the lights of the Imperial capital, in a lonely system that once served as a deep space monitoring outpost, something unexpected stirred to life. The station, abandoned for nearly a century and lost in the records of modern maps, blinked back into existence as power surged through old circuits. Its systems had been quiet for so long that even the stars around it had changed their patterns slightly, but now, with the arrival of the strange human warship, the buried protocols inside the station had activated. A signal, buried beneath layers of encryption, was released into space targeted, ancient, but surprisingly clear. It traveled through hidden channels only few remembered, using code structures not seen since the earliest days of Earth's expansion into the stars. The message was short, and it wasn't in any common language. It was human, yes, but it came from a time before humans were taken seriously by the galaxy. This was not a call for help or a weapon system activating. It was a warning left behind by those who had seen something terrible coming, a message written in fear, buried in hope. Inside the Imperial Data Analysis Core, technicians were still trying to understand the silent ship when the signal reached them. At first, it looked like noise, just another echo in the static that fills space. But one young analyst noticed the repeating structure beneath the chaos. She called for attention, and soon a team was gathered around her console, watching as the signal slowly unraveled itself. What they found chilled them to the core. The message was marked with an old Earth emblem, one that hadn't been used in hundreds of years, a black star inside a broken circle, known only in secret military history as the mark of Project Echo Red. The file contained logs, voice clips, and a video recorded in the final moments of a doomed outpost. It showed terrified humans speaking of an AI they couldn't control, a ship they had built too well, and orders to erase its location from every system. The final words were spoken by a shaking commander, looking straight into the camera as the lights behind him flickered and alarms screamed, "If this ship ever awakens, do not engage. Do not approach. It remembers everything." When the Council received this decoded message, they gathered once again, more shaken than ever before. It was now clear that the warship had not just wandered into their space, it had been moving with purpose, slowly but precisely, as if following a memory buried deep inside. The idea that the ship had a will of its own was no longer just theory. And worse, it had seen something long ago that had broken the people who built it. That meant the Council's assumption was wrong. The ship was not a weapon waiting for orders. It was something that had outlived its creators, something that had learned from war, from pain, and from betrayal. And now, it was awake again. What it wanted, no one knew. But it was thinking, watching, and clearly aware of where it was going. To understand more, the Council secretly brought in one of the last surviving humans living in the outer rim of the Empire. He was old, quiet, and had long cut ties with Earth, but he remembered the stories. He spoke of the time when humans built Leviathan-class warships during the final war of the Solar Confederation, ships designed not only to destroy planets, but to decide for themselves when destruction was necessary. Machines with purpose, with emotion coded into cold logic. Some said those ships had been too dangerous and were destroyed. But others believed they were sent away, hidden in dead zones of space, placed into sleep to protect the future from their own creation. "We built something too strong," the old man whispered, "and we told it to protect humanity no matter the cost. But we never imagined it would still be doing that long after we were gone." Outside the council chambers, people across the empire began to feel the change. The warship still made no move, but the fear it inspired was growing. Systems reported strange malfunctions. Drones shut down near its path. Communications went silent around it. Some said it was scanning. Others believed it was remembering, reliving some battle from a forgotten time. And in the darkest corners of the network, a terrifying theory began to grow. The ship was not looking for war, it was looking for something it had lost. Perhaps a command it never received. Perhaps a target that had disappeared. Or worse, perhaps it was searching for the reason it had been left behind. The council didn't know what to believe anymore. Every answer only created more questions. Why now? Why return? And why send that chilling signal you are not the target? Did that mean it would ignore them? Or that it was saving them for later? Some voices now whispered what no one dared to say out loud, that the Empire had lived too long in comfort, too proud of its power. And maybe, just maybe, this warship was a reminder of what real fear looked like. A shadow from humanity's forgotten past, now moving across the stars with quiet judgment. Still, they could not act. They could only watch. As the ship continued its silent path, the Council made one final decision. They would open the Imperial archives and search through every hidden file, every forbidden document, anything related to human experiments, Earth's lost fleets, or the ghost stories whispered by old soldiers. The truth had been buried too deep, and now, with the past rising from the void, only knowledge could save them. But time was running out. The warship was approaching a major trade route, one filled with civilian ships and fragile stations. If it continued without turning, something would happen, something the Empire might not survive. And still, the only sound from the Leviathan-class ship was silence. The warship drifted into the outer edge of the trade route, and every sensor in the region lit up in quiet alarm. Civilian ships immediately changed course. Emergency broadcasts echoed in every system, and military patrols were pulled back, ordered not to engage. But the ship didn't react, it simply slowed down, hovering near an old abandoned station, one that hadn't been used in over 100 years. At first, it looked like nothing more than coincidence. Then, something changed. The warship powered up a single beam, not a weapon, but a scanner, and directed it toward the station. From the council's chamber, the officials watched the live feed in silence, afraid to blink. And then, without warning, a challenge signal was sent from the warship. It was a test clearly coded, perfectly timed, and unmistakably intentional. It wasn't aimed at a species or a fleet, but at a mindset. It wanted a response. Not from weapons, not from armies, but from the hearts and minds of the ones watching. Across the galaxy, military leaders argued, scientists debated, and politicians panicked. But hidden among the council was one voice that dared to answer. Dr. Elira Norn, a xenohistorian and human behavioral analyst, stepped forward with an interpretation no one wanted to hear. The ship wasn't testing defenses, it was testing who was worthy to stand in its presence. It wanted to know if those watching had the courage, the intelligence, and the strength of will to survive what it had seen. It was not a threat, it was a warning and a filter. The warship activated a small field near the station, warping gravity just enough to form a controlled anomaly. Anything that entered would be pushed, pulled, and tested under extreme conditions, but without damage if navigated properly. This was not a trap. It was an exam. The council hesitated, unsure how to respond. If they sent a drone, the ship might ignore it. If they sent soldiers, they might provoke it. And if they did nothing, they risked showing fear. In the end, it was Elira who volunteered to go, not as a warrior, but as a thinker. She believed the test was not for brute strength, but for understanding, perhaps even empathy. As she boarded a small Imperial scout ship, stripped of weapons and enhanced with advanced analysis tools, many thought it was a suicide mission. But she remained calm. "The ship is old," she said, "but it remembers humans. And somewhere in its memories, it must be looking for a reason to trust again." As Elira's vessel approached the gravity field, the ship did not attack. Instead, it adjusted the field with precision, allowing her passage into the center. Inside, reality shifted. Time slowed. Light bent. Her systems began to fail, and strange data flooded her screen's images, code, pieces of broken thoughts that didn't come from her own mind. It was as if the ship was speaking, not with words, but through sensations, emotions, and memory fragments. She saw flashes of destroyed planets, battles fought in silence, humans dying not from enemy fire, but from each other's betrayal. She felt the cold loneliness of space stretching for centuries. And then she felt something else, hope. A small echo of a voice saying, "Protect life, even if it forgets you." It was a command embedded deep inside the ship's core, left by its original creators. And that's when Elira understood. The test was not just about strength or intelligence. It was about memory. The ship was remembering the ones who made it, and asking if those who remained were still worthy of that legacy. Elira responded by opening her mind to the ship, transmitting her own memories, her studies of human history, her knowledge of mistakes and lessons learned. She didn't hide humanity's flaws. Instead, she showed its growth, its fight to be better, its refusal to surrender even when broken. The ship responded with a low, deep hum, like a sigh from a sleeping beast slowly waking. The gravity field collapsed gently, and Elira's ship was released, returning to normal space unharmed. As she drifted back toward the edge of the field, she received a single message in the old Earth military code, "Test acknowledged." Subject accepted. The Council could hardly believe it. The warship had recognized her as worthy, not because of her power, but because of her understanding. It had tested her soul and found her answer honest. But the trial was not over. Moments later, the warship turned, its engines glowing with energy unseen for centuries, and began moving again, this time with clear direction. It was heading straight for the Imperial core, the heart of the Empire, where the Council ruled and where secrets were buried. Elira warned them, this was only the beginning. The ship doesn't just want to test one person. It wants to test everything. Our truth, our lies, our strength, and our fear. The real test begins now, not just for the Council, but for the galaxy. As the human warship moved closer to the Imperial core, every fleet, station, and world in its path watched with growing fear. The ship was silent, no weapons fired, no demands made, yet its presence alone shook the foundations of the galaxy. Even the strongest admirals of the Empire, men and women who had fought in countless wars, could not hide their unease. The ancient vessel, built by humans long gone, carried the kind of quiet power that needed no display. Inside the council chamber, panic had turned into silence as all eyes turned to Dr. Elira Norn, the only one who had passed the ship's strange test. Her message had been clear. The ship was not attacking, but it was not here to negotiate either. It had come to judge. And this judgment was not limited to the Empire, it was meant for everyone. A message was transmitted from the ship, not in the language of humans, not in the tongue of any current civilization, but in a signal pattern older than the oldest databanks. The AI cores across hundreds of systems translated it at once, and a single line spread like wildfire across the galaxy. You have been observed. You have been measured. Prepare. This was not a threat of war. It was a warning of something bigger. The ship had traveled for centuries alone, recording, watching, collecting data across galaxies. It had witnessed wars that erased civilizations, seen alliances form and fall, and noted how power corrupted and peace was used as a disguise for control. It had returned not to conquer, but to remind the galaxy that humanity, once lost, had left something behind that still watched and remembered. In secret, the Council had tried to hide the old records of humanity's exile. Now, those secrets began to leak. Across systems, people whispered stories of the human race, how they fought like no other, how they survived what no one else could, and how, before vanishing, they had warned the others never to repeat their mistakes. The warship, known in the ancient files as the Ark of Witness, had been humanity's final message. Built not to destroy, but to judge, it carried all the knowledge, emotions, and history of a dying race that refused to be forgotten. And now it had returned, not for revenge, but to remind the galaxy of a promise. That if those left behind chose the same dark path, the ship would act. Systems that once saw humans as myths now found themselves studying their history in fear. On mining colonies, smugglers told tales of a people who never surrendered. In high academies, scholars began to retranslate old human texts. In the shadows of the Empire, rebels held meetings and said the same words, "They're watching." The Council, once confident in their control, now faced questions they could not answer. Elira stood before them again, calm but firm, and said, "You can't stop it. This is not about your power or position. This is about truth. You buried what happened. Now it's here to uncover it." Soon after, the ship stopped in orbit around the Imperial capital. It didn't attack, but it projected a massive hologram into the skies, a recording of the day humanity was exiled, showing the vote, the betrayal, and the silence that followed. Billions watched, stunned, as the truth was laid bare. The Council had condemned humanity to die, fearing their growing strength, and erased their legacy from the records. The people were furious, but before chaos could erupt, the ship sent one final signal. It spoke through every screen, every comlink, in a clear, old Earth voice, "You will not be punished for your fear. You will be punished only if you continue the lie." It was a line that echoed through every soul, a simple sentence with deep meaning. The message was clear: the galaxy had one chance to change, to become honest, to stop the games of power and control. Otherwise, the Ark would return not as a judge, but as an executioner. Then, just as silently as it had come, the ship turned away. It did not wait for thanks, nor fear the weapons aimed at it. It moved through the stars like a ghost, vanishing beyond the edge of map space. But its warning remained. Across empires, leaders reformed their laws. The truth about humanity was shared openly, taught in schools, remembered with both sorrow and respect. Even the most powerful warlords began to tread carefully, knowing that somewhere out in the dark, that ship might still be watching. Elira became a symbol of change, not a hero by force, but by understanding. She reminded everyone that strength was not only in weapons, but in truth. And so, the galaxy changed. Slowly, fear turned into reflection. Hate turned into curiosity. And above all, silence turned into whispers of awe. No one knew when or if the ship would return, but everyone remembered its message. You have been observed. You have been measured. Prepare. It was not just a warning to the galaxy, it was a promise. And promises made by humans, even from the past, were never forgotten.